Screams, chaos, and the sound of a man's heart about to stop. Security rushes in. Doctors shout. At the very moment, a multi-billion-dollar fortune is officially transferred to a stranger's child. The billionaire collapses, and the real demon shows its face. But how did we get here? How did a Seattle hospital corridor become the stage for a war over both a fortune and a soul? How did the most powerful man in the tech world fall, not in a boardroom, but on a cold linoleum floor, to protect a life he had known for only a few days? It all began 7 days earlier, with a simple question, yet one with the power to change everything. A question that no lawyer, no business partner could have ever prepared him for. This is Jackson Blackwood, a king of a tech empire. A man who spent 58 years of his life building a fortune the world envied, but forgot to build a home. A man who could buy anything except for one single thing: time. The doctor said he only had weeks left, and this is Zoe, 6 years old, a little warrior with a tired heart counting down her days. Her greatest assets aren't stocks or real estate, but a smile that can light up a gloomy hospital room, and an imagination that soars higher than any skyscraper. One man has everything, but is about to lose his life. And one has nothing but the life she is about to lose. Two parallel lines, two different universes, until fate decided to bend them together. The story you are about to see is not just a moving picture. It's a mirror, reflecting a question that perhaps every one of us has faced at some point. Have you ever paused amidst the busy grind of work, of bills, of goals to be achieved, and asked yourself, what is the true legacy I want to leave behind? Not the amount of money in an account, but the mark left on someone's heart. Not what people write about you in the press, but the stories they will tell about you with a warm smile. Jackson Blackwood had 58 years to find the answer, but he didn't. And now, he only has 7 days. Can a man who never knew how to love learn to be a father in his final days? Can a tired heart be healed by an unexpected love? And will that enormous fortune be a blessing or a deadly curse? Join me as we turn back time and witness the fateful 7-day journey that shook an entire empire. Starting now. 7 days before the storm. Seattle's gray rain hung a somber curtain outside the glass window of the medical consultation room. Inside, the air was even colder. Jackson Blackwood sat motionless in the expensive leather chair, but it offered no comfort. He had just heard the words that no one, no matter how powerful, could negotiate with: glioblastoma, terminal, inoperable. The doctors said much more after that. Words like palliative care, a few weeks, maybe a month if you're lucky, washed over him like static. For the first time in his life, Jackson Blackwood, the man who could buy an island with a single phone call, was utterly powerless. The tech empire he built, the skyscrapers bearing his name, the billion-dollar figures in his accounts, all of it suddenly felt meaningless and absurd. They couldn't buy him another day. He left the clinic in a daze. Instead of heading straight for the luxury car waiting for him, his aimless feet led him deeper into the labyrinth of Seattle Grace Medical Center. He wandered, without purpose, through stark white corridors, thick with the characteristic smell of antiseptic. He wanted to escape his own death sentence, and ironically, he walked deeper into the very place where life and death coexisted in every breath. That's when he heard it. A soft, steady whirring. The sound of rubber wheels on a tile floor. He looked up, and his tired eyes met a strange sight. A little girl, about 6 years old, was expertly maneuvering her own wheelchair. One hand held the joystick, the other held firmly onto an IV pole, also on wheels, moving in perfect rhythmic tandem. Her blonde hair was in two pigtails, and though her face was a little pale, her eyes were clear and shone with a startling strength. She didn't look like a pitiful patient. She looked like a small explorer conquering her own domain. The girl stopped a few feet from Jax, not out of fatigue, but seemingly to wait for a nurse to pass. She looked up at him, her wide eyes showing no fear or shyness. Her gaze swept over his perfectly tailored suit, the Patek Philippe watch on his wrist, and his gleaming leather shoes. She tilted her head in a gesture of pure, childlike curiosity. Jax normally hated to be bothered, but right now, he didn't have the mind to care. He just stood there, a statue of wealth and despair. And then, the girl spoke. Her clear, articulate voice echoed in the quiet hallway, striking the defensive wall Jax had spent a lifetime building. "Mister," Zoe said, "you look very rich." Jax didn't answer, just frowned slightly. The girl continued, without a hint of hesitation. "Can you help me find a new heart? The doctors say only lots and lots of money can buy more time." Jackson Blackwood's entire world came to a halt. He had heard countless proposals, flatteries, and pleas throughout his career. People asked him for money to invest, to build, to buy. But no one, not a single person, had ever asked him to buy life. No one had ever used the words money and time in the same sentence with such raw, painful honesty. The child's question wasn't a plea. It was a statement of a harsh reality she had already accepted. Life had a price, and she couldn't afford it. Jax stared at Zoe. He saw her faintly beating heart, and he felt the tumor growing mercilessly in his own brain. He and this child, one old, one young, one rich, one poor, were standing on the same precipice. They both needed time. They were both facing death, but the bitter difference was, his money could buy time for her, but not for himself. A nurse arrived and gently pushed Zoe's wheelchair along. The girl turned to wave at Jax, a simple, polite gesture, then disappeared around the corner. Jax Blackwood remained standing there. The curtain of rain outside the window seemed to fall even harder, but inside him, something had just been kindled. The cold despair began to give way to another feeling, a familiar one he hadn't felt in a long time, the urge for a fight. He had lost the war with his own fate, but here, right in front of him, was another war. A war he could join, a war he could win. He pulled the expensive phone from his pocket. His trembling fingers swiped across the screen, dialing a familiar number. "Noah." His voice was hoarse but full of authority. "Listen to me. At Seattle Grace Medical Center Pediatric Wing. There's a patient named Zoe, about 6 years old, blonde hair, waiting for a heart transplant. I want to know everything about her. Condition, family, prognosis, everything. And get our lawyer, Ava Chen, on the line. Tell her to prepare an unlimited trust fund. I don't care what it costs. I want that girl at the top of every transplant list, whatever it takes." The other end of the line was silent for a second, likely in shock at the unusual command. "Sir, Mr. Blackwood, is this charity?" Jax looked down the empty hallway, where Zoe had just vanished. A faint, almost bitter smile touched his lips. "No, Noah," he said. "This isn't charity. It's a business deal. Probably my last important one." He hung up, and for the first time in hours, he felt like he could breathe again. He was still dying. But Jackson Blackwood would not go out in despair. He would go out in a fight. When a man like Jackson Blackwood makes a decision, A machine moves with terrifying speed and precision. Less than an hour after the call, the gears began to turn. At the headquarters of Blackwood Industries, in a glass office overlooking all of Seattle, lawyer Ava Chen had put a 9-figure merger on hold. She and her team began drafting the legal documents for a trust named Project Starlight, a name Jax's assistant, Noah Riley, had hastily conceived. At the same time, Noah was working with the nation's top medical experts, using Jax's network and influence to explore every option, every possibility, to accelerate the search for a compatible heart for Zoe. Calls were made. Emails were sent with the highest priority. The Blackwood machine had been activated, and its sole target now was the life of a 6-year-old girl. Meanwhile, in another corner of the hospital, Helen, Zoe's grandmother, sat on a hard plastic chair in the waiting room. She had been here for most of the day, and exhaustion was etched into every line on her face. Her shoulders slumped, her old, worn-out cardigan faded. She had just spoken with the doctor. Zoe's situation was not good. The girl needed a miracle. Just then, a hospital administrator in a neat suit approached her. He sat down, his face wearing an expression of solemn importance. "Ma'am," the administrator began, "I have some very good news. The hospital has just received support from an anonymous donor. All of Zoe's medical expenses, surgery, and aftercare will be covered. Furthermore, with these new resources, we can place her on a special priority list nationwide." Helen blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. Her ears were ringing. An anonymous donor? Who would do that? We have nothing. He has requested to remain anonymous, the administrator replied, smiling professionally. You just need to know that from this moment on, Zoe will receive the best care that modern medicine can offer. A miracle, ma'am, a true miracle. Helen couldn't cry. She could only bring her calloused, trembling hands to her mouth. Hope, an emotion she had almost forgotten, suddenly rushed back, so powerfully it made her dizzy. But before the joy could settle, a shadow from the past appeared at the end of the hallway. A thin man in a ragged leather jacket was approaching. His hair was greasy, and his shifty eyes scanned the surroundings. Helen recognized him immediately. Cody Randall, her late daughter's brother, Zoe's uncle. Helen unconsciously clutched her old handbag. The last time she saw Cody was when he came to borrow money. Well, 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 Cody sneered, a smile devoid of any warmth. I just heard the big news. Heard our little Zoe hit the lottery, didn't she? Some billionaire just bestowed his grace. Cody, Helen's voice was dry and cold. What are you doing here? Visiting my niece. What else? He replied, acting as natural as if he had always cared. After all, I'm her only blood relative left, besides you. Listen, this is our family's lucky break. Don't you be selfish and keep it all to yourself. Helen shot to her feet, her old body trembling with anger. Lucky break. Where have you been for the past 6 years while she was in and out of hospitals? Where were you when I was working myself to exhaustion to pay for her medicine? This is Zoe's miracle, not yours. The smile on Cody's face vanished. The fake friendliness disappeared, replaced by naked greed. Are you getting senile in your old age? I'm her uncle. By law, I have rights. If anything happens to you, I'll be her legal guardian. And with the kind of money that billionaire is pouring in, I'll be sure to give her the best life. He emphasized the word best with a knowing wink. You'd be smart to cooperate, otherwise I'll take this to court. Let's see who the court chooses between an old woman on her last legs and a young, healthy uncle, full of love. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Helen standing there, the newly gifted miracle now tainted by a dark shadow of a threat. A few minutes later, In his penthouse office, Jackson Blackwood was staring out at the Seattle rain through his phone. On the other end, the voice of his lawyer, Ava Chen, was sharp and professional. "The trust is established, sir. The medical procedures are also in motion. However, a variable has just emerged. A man named Cody Randall, claiming to be the girl's uncle, has appeared and hinted at seeking custody." Jax was silent, his fingers tapping lightly on the wooden desk. The rain outside seemed to intensify. "A variable," he repeated, his voice low and cold as ice. "I don't like variables, Ava." He paused, then continued, each word clear and decisive. "Find out everything about him. Every debt, every mistake, every stain on his past. In business, we don't just solve problems, Ava. We eliminate them." The Blackwood machine could operate silently and efficiently, but the machine of envy and dirty media operated with the speed of a wildfire. 2 days later, an artificial peace enveloped Zoe's hospital room. Jax had turned it into a sanctuary. He brought in a nebula projector that transformed the plain white ceiling into a sparkling galaxy. For the first time in decades, Jackson Blackwood wasn't sitting in tense meetings or analyzing stock charts. He sat on a small plastic chair, his back slightly hunched, patiently explaining Orion's belt and the Hunter's Nebula to Zoe on his tablet. "Look here," Jax pointed to a faint, glowing spot, his voice a little awkward, unaccustomed to the role of a storyteller. "They call that a stellar nursery. It's where new stars are born." Zoe listened intently, her eyes reflecting the light of distant galaxies. "So stars have babies too?" Jax paused, then a rare smile flickered across his face. "Yes, Zoe, you could say that." In that moment, he wasn't a dying billionaire. He was just Jax, telling a little girl about the stars. That peace was precious, and it was fragile. It shattered when the door burst open. Noah Riley rushed in, his face pale, holding another tablet. "Jax, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this now." Jax felt a surge of irritation at the intrusion on their privacy, but seeing the panic on his loyal assistant's face, he knew something was wrong. He took the tablet from Noah's hand. On the screen was an article from a Seattle tabloid. The headline blared in bold, sensational letters designed to shock and enrage. "Dying billionaire Jackson Blackwood buys sick child for final PR stunt." Below was a paparazzi photo of Jax entering the hospital, his face looking cold and distant. The article was a venomous indictment, woven from half-truths and lies. It quoted a source close to the family, whom Jax knew with certainty was Cody Randall, lamenting how his poor niece was being exploited by a wealthy predator. The article claimed that Jax, in a desperate attempt to salvage his terrible legacy, had used money to buy off the hospital and the family, turning a medical tragedy into a media circus. It painted Helen as a weak old woman, easily blinded by money. It portrayed Cody as a heartbroken uncle, denied the right to care for his niece by a powerful financial force. Every word was calculated to evoke pity for Cody and hatred for Jax. "It's spreading like wildfire," Noah said, his voice trembling. "The hospital's phone lines are ringing off the hook. Children's rights groups are calling for an investigation. The hospital's lawyers are panicking. Ava is on her way." Jax scrolled down. The comments section was a sea of outrage. People who knew nothing about him, about Zoe, about the truth, were calling his name like he was a monster. The hashtag #SaveZoe from Blackwood had started to trend. A cold fury ran down Jax's spine. This wasn't a business attack. This was a personal, dirty, and cowardly blow. Cody hadn't just targeted him. He had dragged Zoe, an innocent child, into the mud. He had turned her into a victim in his own narrative. He looked up, and his eyes met Zoe's. She had stopped looking at the stars on the ceiling. She was looking at him. She couldn't understand the words on the screen, but she could read the tension on Noah's face and the storm brewing in Jax's eyes. She slid off the bed and walked softly over to him. Her small, cool hand rested on his, which was clenched tightly around the tablet. "Jax, Dad," she called softly. "Are you angry?" Her touch and her clear voice were like cool water on the fire of his rage. The fury didn't disappear, but it transformed. It was no longer the anger of a slandered businessman. It became the indignation of a father seeing his child threatened. He set the tablet down, screen side down. He used his other hand to stroke Zoe's hair, a gesture still clumsy but full of protectiveness. "It's okay, little star," he said, his voice low. "It's just some bad people making a lot of noise, but they won't bother us." He looked at Noah, and his eyes were now cold as steel. The chaos outside no longer mattered. This war now had a clear front line. "Noah," Jax commanded, his voice frighteningly calm. "Tell Ava we're changing tactics. This is no longer a custody issue. This is total war. I want her to use every resource, every connection. We're not just defending, we're going on the attack." He looked down at Zoe, who was still holding his hand in trust. They didn't just pick a fight with me, Jax thought. They picked one with her, and they have no idea what I'm capable of when something is truly mine. The media storm Cody Randall ignited exploded with fierce intensity. But he had made a fatal mistake. He didn't understand the man he was up against. Jackson Blackwood didn't build an empire by defending. He built it with lightning-fast, meticulously calculated attacks. While the outside world raged on social media, another, quieter war was being waged. A conference room at the nearby Four Seasons Hotel had been turned into a command center. Ava Chen, in a sharp business suit, directed a team of the best private investigators, crisis management experts, and top lawyers. They weren't trying to put out the fire. They were digging into the earth to find the source of the arsonist. Every transaction, every relationship, every past mistake of Cody Randall was put under a microscope. But the general of this war, Jackson Blackwood, was not there. His world had shrunk. It was no longer global boardrooms or flashing stock tickers. His world was now the four walls of a hospital room, with a ceiling of an artificial galaxy and the steady beeping of machines as its soundtrack. His daily schedule had completely changed. Mornings no longer began with market reports from London, but with helping Zoe arrange her colored pencils in perfect rainbow order. Lunch wasn't a $1,000 business meal, but patiently coaxing her to finish her soup. And evenings, instead of reading complex contracts, he learned to tell stories, his voice, initially stiff and foreign, gradually growing warmer as he read about dragons and princesses. It was in this shrunken world, in the eye of the storm, that their bond became unbreakable. One afternoon, as the noise outside continued unabated, Zoe tugged on Jax's sleeve. "Jax, Dad," she whispered, "can we build a fort?" Jax, a man who had commanded the construction of skyscrapers, now found himself awkwardly gathering pillows and blankets to build a small fort next to the hospital bed. Inside the cramped fortress, lit only by the flashlight from his phone, the noisy world outside seemed to disappear. "Why are the people on TV so angry at you?" Zoe asked, her clear voice echoing in the fort's quiet space. Jax was silent for a moment. He could have explained greed, lies, and media wars. But he chose a different answer, an answer his heart gave him. "Because sometimes," he said softly, When people see something beautiful and precious, they want to take it or break it. They don't understand it. But don't you worry. He stroked her hair. Dad won't let them. It was the first time he had called himself Dad. The word escaped his lips naturally, without a trace of force. It wasn't a legal title, but an oath from the bottom of his heart. Zoe smiled, a contented smile. She didn't need a complicated explanation. She just needed a promise. The next day, Ava Chen entered the room with a thin briefcase. Her face was no longer tense, but wore an expression of cold efficiency. She waited until Zoe was fast asleep before handing the case to Jax. "We have everything, sir," Ava said quietly. "Cody Randall isn't just a failure. He's a criminal." Jax opened the file. Inside was a brief but damning summary. Gambling debts in Reno. A fraud charge in Arizona, settled out of court. 2 summons for failure to pay child support for a son he never acknowledged. "This is enough to silence him," Jax murmured. "There's more," Ava said, pointing to the last page. "This is the clincher." The investigators found an old police report, filed 7 years ago, just before Zoe's mother passed away. The filer was Helen, Zoe's mother. She accused Cody of embezzling nearly all the savings meant for her medical treatment. The case was dropped when she died shortly after. Jax closed the file. The air in the room grew cold. Cody wasn't just a greedy opportunist. He was a vulture who had fed on the pain of his own family. "The press," Jax commanded, his voice devoid of emotion. "Leak all of this to a reputable paper, not the tabloid that attacked us. Choose a major newspaper, one that will run an in-depth investigative piece. Let the truth speak for itself." Ava nodded. "I understand. We'll destroy him." "No," Jax interrupted, his gaze fixed on the sleeping Zoe. "We won't destroy him. Destroying him means creating more noise, more arguments. She's heard enough noise." He thought for a moment, another more subtle plan forming. Arrange a meeting. "Just me, you, him, and his lawyer. No one else. The public war is over. Now it's time to end the private one." The meeting room was on the 15th floor of the hospital's administrative wing. It was sterile, cold, and anonymous, with a long wooden table and black leather chairs. Outside the window, the Seattle rain continued its steady rhythm, washing the city clean. This was Jax's territory, a completely controlled space, but it was also part of the hospital, a constant reminder of his own fragility. Jax sat at the head of the table, looking more tired and pale under the fluorescent lights. A small IV line was discreetly hidden under his sleeve, but his eyes were not tired. They were sharp, focused, and dangerous. Ava Chen sat beside him, silent as a statue, her briefcase placed neatly in front of her. Cody Randall and his lawyer entered, bringing a cloud of smugness with them. Cody had swapped his tattered leather jacket for a cheap suit, as if trying to play the part of a respectable guardian. "Mr. Blackwood," Cody's lawyer began, his voice slick. "We come in good faith. My client, Mr. Randall, is very concerned for his niece's well-being. He believes that, as her blood relative, he has an indispensable role in her future. However, we also acknowledge your generosity." The lawyer paused, pushing a piece of paper towards Jax. "This is our proposal. A payment of $10 million to compensate for emotional distress and to allow Mr. Randall to relinquish his guardianship claims amicably. Consider it an investment in your privacy." Jax said nothing. He simply nodded slightly at Ava Chen. That was the signal. Ava opened her briefcase. She didn't look at the other lawyer. She looked directly into Cody's eyes, and her professional smile was ice cold. "What an interesting proposal," she said, her voice even. "Before we discuss it, I'd just like to confirm a few details." She took out a sheet of paper and placed it on the table. "This is a record from a casino in Reno. It shows a Mr. Cody Randall owing a gambling debt of $75,000. That would be you, correct, Mr. Randall?" The smugness on Cody's face flinched. That's a personal matter." Ava ignored him, producing another sheet. "And this is an out-of-court settlement from Arizona, related to a small-scale investment fraud scheme. You agreed to pay back the victims to avoid prosecution. A shame you still haven't paid them in full." She continued. With each sentence, a new piece of paper was laid on the table, creating an ever-thickening stack. 2 summons from family court for failure to pay child support for a 7-year-old son in Oregon. An eviction notice from your apartment for 6 months of unpaid rent. Cody's lawyer started to sweat. "This is irrelevant." "My client." "Oh, it's very relevant," Ava cut in, her voice sharp as a razor. She placed the final document on the table, a copy of an old police report. "Because it shows a pattern of behavior, a pattern of desperation and preying on your loved ones." Only then did Jack speak. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it filled the silent room. "Zoe's mother," Jack said. "Helen's sister." Cody flinched, looking up at Jax, his eyes now filled with undisguised panic. "She filed a report against you, Cody," Jax continued, staring him down, "for stealing her medical funds. The meager savings she had scraped together. You took it when she was at her most vulnerable." Silence filled the room. Cody's lawyer gaped, speechless. He had been deceived by his own client. Cody trembled. That was a misunderstanding." "No," Jack said flatly. "That's who you are. And now, you're going to listen very carefully." He stood up, needing to lean on the table for balance. The entire power of the Blackwood Empire seemed to be channeled into his gaze. "You will sign these papers." He gestured to another file Ava had just laid out. "You will permanently relinquish all parental rights, all guardianship claims, to Zoe Mitchell. You will agree to a restraining order, keeping you 1 mile away from her and Helen. You will disappear from their lives, forever." Cody stammered. And what do I get?" Jax looked at him with utter contempt. "You will get nothing," he said. "You will not get $10 million. You will not get $1. Your reward is my silence. I will not send this file to your creditors. I will not notify the IRS of your undeclared income. And I will not forward it to the district attorney's office, where they might be very interested in an old, unresolved fraud case. That is my offer." "No, it's not an offer," Jack said. "It is the only future you have that doesn't involve a prison cell. Now pick up the pen and sign." Cody Randall, the man who had walked in with the swagger of a hunter, now shrank like a cornered animal. He shakily picked up the pen. Under the cold gazes of Jax and Ava, he signed every page, signing away his future, signing away the last connection to the niece he had never truly considered family. When it was done, he and his lawyer left quietly, not daring to look back. The door closed, returning the room to silence. The war was over. There were no screams, no gunshots, only the cold scratch of a pen on paper. Jax let out a long breath as exhaustion hit him. He sat down, looking out the window towards the main hospital building, where a little girl was sleeping, unaware that her world had just been cleansed of the ghosts of its past. As the threat of Cody Randall dissolved like a phantom, a quiet settled over Jack's and Zoe's world. There were no more calls from lawyers, no more sensational headlines, no more prying eyes. All that remained was the steady beep of machines and the dwindling of time. Jax knew he didn't have many days left. The pain grew more intense, and even the strongest doses of morphine could only offer a few brief hours of clarity. He dedicated every precious moment to Zoe. They had finished their pillow fort, named all the stars on the ceiling, and read every book in the pediatric ward's library. And then, one Tuesday morning, before the sun had risen, the miracle arrived. An urgent call from the National Organ Donation Center. A healthy, perfectly compatible heart had just been donated after a tragic accident in Portland. It was for Zoe. The hospital instantly went into emergency mode. Top surgeons were assembled. A medical helicopter took off into the early morning mist to bring the gift of life to Seattle. Joy and hope erupted. But it also brought an unavoidable truth. The start of Zoe's journey to life was the end of Jax's. Two journeys began in parallel. Zoe, in a patient gown printed with little dinosaurs, was prepped by nurses for the biggest surgery of her life. They comforted her, put fun cartoon stickers on her hand, and promised that when she woke up, she would have a superhero heart. She was scared and excited, constantly asking about her Jax dad. Meanwhile, on another floor, Jax was also being attended to by nurses. But there were no cartoon stickers, only a quiet dignity. They helped him with a strong dose of painkillers to grant him one last period of lucidity. His body was too weak. His organs were beginning to fail. The doctors said he only had a few hours. As the gurney rolled Zoe towards the operating room, it passed the corridor leading to Jax's intensive care unit. Through the glass window, they saw each other. Zoe waved, a brave and trusting gesture. Jax, though incredibly weak, managed to lift his hand and place it on the glass, a final goodbye. No words were spoken, but everything was understood. Once Zoe was in surgery, Jax called Noah and Ava to his room. His breathing was shallow, but his eyes were incredibly clear. "Noah," he said softly, "in the safe in my office, there's a wooden box, the Stargazer box. Bring it here." 15 minutes later, the box was placed on Jax's bed. It was made of walnut, its lid engraved with the Big Dipper constellation. Jax stroked its smooth surface. "Ava," he turned to his lawyer, "inside this is my final will. For her. Not about assets, but about life." He opened the box. Inside, nestled on dark blue velvet, were letters carefully sealed with wax. 10th birthday, high school graduation, the day you find love, your wedding day, when you become a mother. And in the center, a formally framed certificate, the deed to a star in the Milky Way, named Zoe's Hope. "Make sure she gets these on the right day," Jack said, his voice fading. "Tell her about me, not about a billionaire, but about a father who found his life's greatest treasure in his final days." Ava Chen, the woman of steel who never cried in negotiations, nodded silently, a lump forming in her throat. Just before the surgeons began, Helen brought Zoe to see Jax one last time. The girl, already in her surgical gown, climbed onto the bed and snuggled up to him. "Daddy, does it hurt?" Zoe asked, her small hand clutching one of Jax's fingers. "Not at all, my little star," Jax lied, the most beautiful white lie he had ever told. "When you wake up, you'll have a strong heart." You'll be able to run and jump and play under the stars." "Really?" "Really," Jax affirmed. "And every night, when you look up at the sky, find the brightest star. That's Zoe's hope. That's where I'll be, always watching over you. You will never be alone." Zoe get do. Đôi mắt em ánh lên sự tin tưởng tuyệt đối. Con yêu bố, Jack's dad. "I love you too, Zoe Mitchell," he whispered, kissing her hair. "My treasure." Those were his last words. As Zoe was wheeled into the operating room, Jax closed his eyes. He was no longer fighting. He had completed his mission. His mind was no longer on numbers or deals, but on the image of a little girl running on a green lawn under a sky full of stars. A few hours later, in the silence of the waiting room, as Noah and Ava stood anxiously, a surgeon emerged. His face was tired, but his eyes were bright. He approached Noah, pulled off his mask, and spoke. "The surgery was a success. The new heart is beating. She's going to make it." At that very moment, in another room, Jackson Blackwood's heart monitor let out one long, final, steady beep, and then fell silent. Outside, the Seattle rain had finally stopped, and in the freshly washed night sky, one star seemed to shine brighter than all the rest. Time is a miraculous current. It can take a life, but it can also heal and nurture new life. Many years passed. In a sun-drenched park in Seattle, a young girl's clear laughter rang out. It was Zoe, now 10 years old. She was running across the grass, her blonde hair flying in the wind. Her feet were swift, without a hint of hesitation. The faint scar on her chest, hidden beneath her t-shirt, was the only trace of a stormy past. The heart of a stranger was beating strong and healthy in her chest, a gift bought with a great love. From a nearby bench, Helen watched her granddaughter with a smile, her eyes sparkling with happiness and gratitude. Beside her was Noah Riley. After Jax passed away, Noah kept his promise. He became Zoe's legal guardian, an uncle, a big brother, and the dedicated manager of the legacy his former boss had left behind. They had become a family, a small one built on tragedy, but bound by love. On the evening of Zoe's 10th birthday, after the candles were blown out, Noah brought out a familiar walnut box. The Stargazer box. He carefully took out a sealed envelope on which was written, "For my little star, on the day you turn a decade old." Zoe carefully opened the letter. Jax's handwriting, though written in his final days, was still strong and clear. His voice seemed to echo through the words. "My dearest Zoe, my little star, if you are reading this, it means you are 10 years old. I wish I could be there to see how much you've grown. Do you still like stories about dragons? Or do you have new favorites now? Today, I want to give you a gift. It's a secret. Never be afraid of your scars, Zoe. They are not signs of weakness. They are maps of the battles you have won. The heart beating in your chest is a testament to your courage, and to the courage of someone else you never met. Live a full life, not just for yourself, but for them, too. Always be kind, always be curious, and never stop looking up at the stars. I'm still up there, at Zoe's hope, watching over you. Always. All my love. Your dad, Jax. Zoe finished reading, tears rolling down her cheeks, but she was smiling. He wasn't gone. He was still here, in the letters, in the stories, and in the night sky. Jackson Blackwood's legacy didn't end there. The Starlight Trust, funded the construction of a state-of-the-art medical facility, named the Zoe's Hope Pediatric Heart Center. It became one of the world's leading institutions, a place where medical miracles happened daily, where other children were given the chance to run under the sun. The love Jax had for one little girl had spread, saving hundreds, thousands of other lives. 6 more years passed. In a quiet corner of the medical center that bore her name, a 16-year-old girl sat beside a 5-year-old boy who was about to have surgery. The girl had shining blonde hair and warm, clear eyes. She was a volunteer. "It won't hurt," Zoe said softly to the little boy. "I promise. When you wake up, you'll feel like a superhero. I know, because I was just like you." She pointed out the window, towards the night sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. "See that star?" she said. "The brightest one. That's my guardian star. My dad gave it to me. He said he's always watching. You have a star of your own, too. You just have to pick one." The boy followed her finger, and the fear in his eyes seemed to lessen. After her volunteer shift, Zoe went to the hospital's rooftop, where a large telescope was set up. She looked up at the sky, searching for Zoe's hope. She didn't need the telescope to find it anymore. She could recognize it instantly. The story of Jackson and Zoe, of a dying billionaire and a girl who needed a heart, had finally come to a close. But its message lives on. It reminds us of a simple but often forgotten truth. The true legacy of a person is not measured by the numbers in their bank account or the buildings they erected. It is measured by the lives they touched, by the loving imprint they leave on the hearts of others. Your worth is not in what you accumulate for yourself, but in what you give away. Sometimes, the chance to live the most meaningful life, to become the best version of ourselves, comes in the most unexpected moments, even when we think we have nothing left to give. So ask yourself, what is the legacy you want to leave behind? And what in this life truly makes you feel rich?